welcome to my channel. My name is Shar. Today we are doing the mid-year freakout tag. I'm super excited. I've never done this tag, but I have a booktube channel, so obviously I love talking to you about all the shit that I've read this year. So without further ado, let's just jump on into it. Look at me being organized and having notes because I was gonna record this just off the cuff and I was like, you know what? I should probably have an idea of how I'm going to answer these questions. And I should also actually have the question somewhere in front of me. Give me a minute. I hope the camera angle hasn't changed, but it very well may have. I don't remember what position I was in, but I feel like this was roughly it. Here I was like, look at me with all of my notes. I'm so prepared. And then I didn't even have the fucking questions. Okay, so I have an appointment in like 30 minutes to go see a career counselor. So let's see if I can get this done in 30 minutes. If I've timed this correctly, this should be the first video that you're seeing on this version of my channel. I recorded a video before this, which you will see after this video, but fingers crossed, that means that I can give you better descriptions than I did in the first video I recorded, where I was just like, it was great. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic. So I'm trying to give you more of my thoughts on the books that I actually read. So the first question is, what's the best book you've read in 2021? And of course, my answer is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I read this in the first week of January. I literally think it was New Year's Day that I read this book, and I finished it the day after. I read it as an audiobook. The audiobook was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I was also super surprised by it because I don't read sci-fi ever, and this was my first science fiction that I really enjoyed. I love the world building. I loved the humor in the book. The science felt really accessible and believable. Andy Weir could have been talking out of his ass and like making up shit left and right, and I still would have believed it in this story, but it was just really well done. The atmosphere was fantastic, and then when they were in space and that storyline was cute. I loved the friendship. I loved the writing. The audiobook was very well narrated, so that was the best book of 2021 for me. The best sequel I've read in 2020, did I say 2021? It's 2022, y'all. That's embarrassing. That was the best book of 2022. So the best sequel I read in 2022, I was initially struggling with this question. I'm like, but I didn't read that many sequels. I read a lot of sequels actually, because when I find a series that I really like, I tend to binge that series. So I read a few series. The first thought that came to mind was Famine by Laura Thalassa. So Famine is the third book in kind of the Horsemen of the Apocalypse series. It starts with pestilence, and essentially some divine being has decided that the human race fucking sucks and they should go extinct. So they trigger the apocalypse, and so the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse come to eliminate the population. So it was really just funny, like dark funny, because of course Famine is a bringer of the apocalypse. He's there to cause mass death. I'm talking like thousands. Anywhere he goes, people die, but he spares this one girl from his past because they have a history together. He decides to let her live, and she eventually tags along because she's like, yo, can you stop killing everybody? And of course he's like, I don't fucking think so. So it is a romance. They do fall in love, but it was just so fun. And you can see how much I'm grinning. It was funny. It was dark. It was heartwarming. I loved their relationship. I loved their banter. The world felt very vivid. And I just really, really loved this sequel. The series itself is not without its problems. There are definitely some things where I'm like, girl, I don't think you need to do that. But for the third book, I really loved that as a sequel. The other options that I had were Misrule by Heather Walter. I really loved that one just because of the complexity that Heather Walter added to the relationship between Alice and Aurora. I thought that was really well done. But the book I'm going to actually choose for the answer to this question is Redemptor by Jordan E. Fico. This is This is the sequel to Raybearer, and I really love the character exploration in this book. When the author was writing this book, they were very open and vulnerable about their own mental health and how they were dealing with depression. And in this book, we're still following our main character. I believe, I'm definitely butchering this, that's not how you pronounce her name, but I always pronounce it as Tarasi. And we're following her, and it's a sequel, so I can't tell you too much, but it's all about her friendship, her family, how she comes to accept herself, the the guilt that she's dealing with, coming to terms with her own power, this subplot for essentially a revolution that's happening in her world, and just her own mental health and her struggles with depression. Of course, now an ambulance wants to come by. It was a really great sequel. I really loved it. I love the cast of characters. It is a African inspired fantasy. It's an all black cast. I freaking loved it so much, and I would definitely recommend that you read this series if you haven't already and you like fantasy. It's also YA, but it doesn't feel very young. I would consider it like more like the 17 age range and less of like the 13 age range. So the next question, a new release I haven't read, but I want to. The easy answer to this is Delilah Green Doesn't Care, because I saw Mina Reeds really loved it. She said Delilah was that bitch. I believe her. So this is an anticipated book for me. Most anticipated book for the second half of 2022. This was harder to answer because I don't really keep track of publication dates, and I don't tend to care about when a book is coming out. I'm a mood reader, so when it lands in my lap and I feel like reading it, I'm going to pick it up. But I did scour and try to find something on my to be read list on Goodreads that I am looking forward to and isn't out yet. Initially, the answer was How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I read Horror Store for Summerween last year, and I loved that. Katie Coulson called Grady Hendrix the king of comedic horror, 100%. The book is funny and dark and grim and like nauseating, but so fun, so enjoyable. So it was going to be How to Sell a Haunted House, but that got pushed back to next year, January 2023. So my new answer is The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I've never read a Silvia Moreno Garcia before, but I did read The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter this year, and its sequel, European Travels for the Monstrous Gentlewoman. We're not going to talk about my thoughts on the second book, but I loved The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, and I really love the idea of reading a story with Dr. Moreau. I've never read the book that character is from, but I'm super excited to read this just because of that connection I feel to this fictional character in this other book, if that makes sense. I know that's weird, but that's why I'm excited about that book. The biggest disappointment. This was another easy answer for me. You haven't seen my June wrap up yet, but when you do, you'll see this book again. It was The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. Now, I love horror. I am a horror girly. When I read horror, I'm there for the vibes. The vibes were not there, however. I was looking for a paranormal horror because that is what the summary states. It talks about a haunted house. Yes, there are ghosts, but the ghosts aren't integral to the story at all. And it was just so boring. That sounds harsh, but it was boring. We were following and I feel like it led up to fucking nothing, like literally nothing. Why did I care? New to me favorite authors, again, because I'm a mood reader and how I tend to read, I just jump into books without really looking at anything else but the summary. So I had to go back and look at, well, who are my repeat authors? They're definitely repeat authors, but there are standout books. One book that I read and adored was Gallant by V.E. Schwab. It was the gothic fairy tale of my dreams. I really loved it. So that made V.E. Schwab a kind of new to me favorite author. What constitutes a favorite author? I've only read one of her books, but I really loved her writing style. Does V.E. Schwab use she, her pronouns? Yeah, I really loved their writing so much, so they definitely became a favorite author for me. I'm planning to read Vicious pretty soon, and also The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. You will see The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue in a reading vlog at some point this summer. Newest fictional crush. There are two simple answers to this. The first is Alice from Malice by Heather Walter. Again, I was obsessed with this book series. I read it in June. It's a duology. It's a fantasy duology about a Sleeping Beauty retelling, but instead of the princess falling in love with the prince, she falls in love with the evil sorceress. So I loved Alice so much. That book was such a character study. I loved her backstory, hearing her thought process, how she rationalized things, what her motivations were. She was just so like sweet, but also such a fucking powerful badass, and I was into that. I was into it. The second answer is Theta from the Diviner series by Libba Bray. Also, I read in June. That June wrap up, you're gonna see I found a lot of favorites for the year in the month of June. Theta is just that bitch, okay? She is a badass with a really complex backstory, super ambitious, takes no shit, but is not afraid to be like soft and feminine and sweet. I've only read the first book in this series. I am gonna read Lair of Dreams and Before the Devil Breaks You. I'm going to ignore King of Crows because I've heard that book is shit. So the series is going to end for me at book 3, but I loved Theta, and for sure, she would be a fictional crush for me. Newest favorite character. Here we have some overlap because my newest favorite character is Theta from the Diviners for all of the reasons that she is also a new fictional crush for me. Books that made me cry. It's not that hard to get me to cry in a book, honestly. You can get me to tear up at almost anything in a book, especially if I really relate to the characters or I just feel that connection with them. But 2 books made me cry this year, and that was One and The Trees Crept In, and that's because of the ending. It's a super weird book about this girl and her little sister who are forced to go live with their aunt in her aunt's childhood home. It's super weird and creepy, and essentially she notices that every single day the forest that's outside of the property gets closer and closer and closer. It's super isolated. There's a lot of things going on, but it's also fantastical in many ways outside of the forest moving in. And the ending just made me cry when you realize what's going on. And then the second book that made me cry was Gallant by V.E. Schwab. The ending. Like, if you know, you know. That's all I'm gonna say to that. A book that made me happy, we have a lot of repeats here, was Famine by Laura Thalassa. Again, I don't know, it was dark. It was dark. We're literally following a horseman of the apocalypse, killing people in droves, literally starving people to death, having mass execution parties. I was having a good time. Like, I don't know what that says about me, but I was having a good time. I was laughing. I thought their banter was hilarious. I loved their relationship. And I very much understood that it was a fictional world, and therefore I was just laughing the whole time. God, that sounds so disturbed. It was a fun book. Listen, it's a funny book. Like, I don't know what to tell you. There's like a favorite book to movie adaptation question, but listen, I don't watch movies and I rarely watch TVs. That's not like a, look at how superior I am, I only read and like write. No, that's not it at all. I literally just do not have the attention span to watch a TV show and get invested. Hello? It just bores me, so I can't get into shows unless I'm already into it. It takes me a long time. It's a lot of work to find something I'm invested in, yada, yada, yada. That's why I don't have a answer to that question. So we're gonna go with book I really need to read by the end of the year. My entire bookshelf. Literally my entire bookshelf and the one in my room. I tried to keep my TBR and my already read pretty balanced. I want them to stay about the same, or if anything, for my TBR to be smaller than the books that I've already read. But I'm a mood reader, and telling myself that I need to read any book just makes it so I won't want to read it. So that's the answer to that question. And the final question is favorite community members. I have tons of people that I love watching here on YouTube. We have Erin from Booked and Busy. We have Mina from Mina Reads, Meg from Meg with Books, Katie Coulson, and Gavin. I really love Gavin's videos. They're just funny, and I love when he reads an entire series and I just binge watch those videos. Like, the feature film length videos are my absolute favorites. But there we have it. That has been my mid-year wrap up of all of the 73 books I've read so far. My goal is 130 this year, so hopefully we are able to accomplish that. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to stick around, I would love to have you subscribe. I read a ton of shit. I have a lot of reading vlogs planned. Of course, this is my first video, but I do want you to stick around, and I'm gonna see you in my next video, which will be my June reading wrap up. Bye.